Studio is a rather familiar face. His, well, I suppose cohort is the word for it in your public concertizing, and that's Stanley Waldoff. David, why don't you take it from there?
Thank you, Matt. Yes, Stanley is here, and I was listening to you on a Brahms program a couple of days ago. Now, you just got back from Russia.
Yes, fascinating trip, and of course it's good to be back in this country, and to see you, and of course Matt again.
Fine. You know, we have been surveying the Beethoven sonatas, and we have gotten up to the 7th piano sonata, Opus 10, number 3. We began yesterday's program with a complete performance by Horowitz, and now we've been hearing comparative performances, and we ended with the slow movement. Did you ever play Opus 10, number 3 by any chance?
Yes, I have, and I think that it's really one of the wonderful piano sonatas Beethoven wrote, especially in terms of a program piece, which one can't always say about all of the sonatas, although masterpieces in their own right.
I understand that, and you're speaking the concert stage per se. It comes off there. It is a concert piece, no doubt about it, even
Absolutely.
though the slow movement is profound. Beethoven is so intimate at times, especially in the later sonatas, that almost a violation to play them in public. And
Yeah.
that's what you mean, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course in this particular sonata there is that element of youthful exuberance.
Yeah. Let's, since we're on this subject, what do you think are the concert sonatas? The Waldstein, of course.
The Appassionata, the Tempest, of course.
Yeah.
Even the Moonlight, which I adore.
The Moonlight, indeed,
I
yes.
adore it. The Opus 10, number 3. The Opus 2, number 2, oddly enough, I think works wonderfully.
Really? Opus 2, number 3, you said?
Opus
Yes.
2, number 3, yeah.
Yes.
And also the Opus 2, number 2.
Yeah.
And
Opus 22.
Opus 22, Opus 27, the E-flat, Opus 27, number 1.
I don't think that works in concert.
I don't know. I've
Opus
heard
90 does not work in concert. 101 is, I think, maybe the 21st century will it will appeal.
101 has never worked for me except once when I heard a Rao give a most stunning performance of it.
106 certainly
The Giant.
the Giant Sonata, yet well, it's a tremendously taxing thing on the audience as well as the pianist. And here's another point. The Beethoven sonatas, of course, they're intellectually and technically difficult, and they're often unpianistic.
Oh, absolutely.
But an audience has to be a very great audience, really, to listen carefully to the Beethoven sonatas.
Yes, we also forgot the Opus 109, Opus 110,
Yes.
which are wonderful, wonderful pieces.
I would
here.
prefer hearing them in a
In a
small place of 150 people at the most.
Yeah, that's true. David always has to have perfection at every moment.
Okay, I think we should hear, though, certainly the great movement which towers over the others in Opus 10, number 3, and that is the Largo e Mesto, and it's a performance here by Wilhelm Bachhaus. And we have a performance we just heard of Wilhelm Bachhaus in the slow movement of the 7th Piano Sonata of Beethoven. Matt, anything to say?
No, not really. I was thinking that maybe you and Stan could expand a bit on what is a concert piece. Something that goes well in a large concert hall. Is that the definition you're using?
Very well said, yes.
Is that's
You
essentially
just solved that, yeah.
In other words, you're saying that there's some sort of intimacy, or is there a restriction or an expansion of technique? Is it more pianistic, more show-offy, or what?
Talk about it,
Boy,
Stan.
that's a very, very difficult question, Matt. Excuse me, and a very, very good one. I just want to say one thing about this: the opening of this piece, very Handelian.
Yes, Handel, was probably Beethoven's favorite composer and used the phrase, "To him I bend the knee."
But back to Matt's question, which I really don't know that I can answer, except to say that it's a combination of intimacy, technical virtuosity.
Certainly of effectiveness. Yes.
Effectiveness is the proper word.
Effectiveness in total.
Yeah.
Remember that Beethoven sometimes writes these two-movement piano sonatas. As Schnabel said of Opus
54.
90 and Opus 54,
Yeah.
of Opus 90, Schnabel said, "Only once in my career did I end it correctly. Did it come off?"
Mm-hmm.
You see, this is what I mean by a concert sonata, where it's stated for the public, in a sense, and the pianist feels at ease with it. He's not necessarily being totally profound. Remember that Beethoven's piano sonatas are among, though, his most intimate creations, not the symphonies. The symphonies are public works. The orchestra is a big public spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
But the piano can be played in public, and it can be played at home.
But you said the Opus 109 is a public piece.
I didn't. I said that.
I think it is. I think
You think it is?
Well, it has a lot of it contains variations,
Mm-hmm.
which in a sense makes it a very different kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Every minute or 2 minutes, and I think that really helps it. I was going to say about the Opus 90 that the great and wonderful Arthur Rubinstein, who used to use that piece all the time in his youth and constantly played it. He laughed and said it was, I think, one of 2 piano sonatas that he played at that time. Said that he finally gave up on the Opus 90 because he felt that the second movement didn't work at all in public.
Yeah. Well,
I thought
this is
perhaps the later sonatas, that is, I'm thinking of 106, 109, to me seem to be very serious, very deep work, psychologically very insightful. Let me finish for a second. And I'm just wondering whether Beethoven wrote them more so as he became more and more deaf, and whether really, I can't understand how you can think of those as public works. They seem to be so
Well, Beethoven
intimate.
thought of the Hammerklavier as a public work, meaning this will be my massive and major achievement in the sonata form.
Yes, and with all due respect to Beethoven, without being irreverent and acknowledging the difficulty of the sonata, it plays, it works, except obviously the fugue is extremely difficult, but somehow it plays, and somehow it does hold attention when played well.
Yes, the only problem with the Hammerklavier in public is what is surrounding it on the program.
Yeah.
This is the important thing.
And too bad, of course, that the slow movement wasn't a separate piece, I've always thought.
Well, that's an interesting thought. It's almost 20 minutes in length, the largest slow movement in the literature. But we're not on the 106 by any means yet, and what I meant about 109 not being public is I qualified that, yes, 109 and 110 also work well, but I like the audience small.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the hall should be exquisite.
It's
the
both
piano.
acoustics and audience.
And of course the pianist helps.
Mm-hmm.
Now we'll have the third movement of Opus 10, number 3, and this will be by, well, I'd say this is a very good player, Arthur Schnabel.
That was the third movement of the Sonata number 7 in D major, Opus 10 number 3 of Beethoven. And we'll return with David Dubal and his guest in
I forgot to mention the performance was Schnabel in the third movement, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Let's now hear Bruce Hungerford in the third movement of the 7th Piano Sonata of Beethoven. Bruce Hungerford in the third movement of Opus 10 number 3. Matt?
Really have nothing to say.
Stan?
I'll follow suit with Matt.
All right, fine. Let's have a performance of the fourth movement of Opus 10 number 3 and the pianist Barenboim.
We apologize, the three of us. That was not the beginning of the last movement of the Beethoven Opus 10 number 3. David, your show?
Well, it's not me that's becoming sloppy. I'm a master of blame. Unfortunately, there's no engineer here, and Matt Edwards, who is... just the sweat really is pouring down him. He has all of these records, and he has to be forgiven. I won't forgive him, but I hope you do.
Oh, absolutely.
He's trying to find the Schnabel performance now of the Opus 10 number 3, and that will... It's here. Okay.
Good, Matt.
Arthur Schnabel in the finale of the Sonata number 7 in D major, Opus 10 number 3. And we'll get to a performance in total by Alfred Brendel. But Stan, you just came back from Russia last night, really, and I haven't asked you a question about it. How many radio stations are there in Moscow?
Oddly enough, in the city of, well, they call it 10 million now with the outlying districts, only four.
4 radio stations
Four
in Moscow?
radio stations in the whole of Moscow.
Matt, how many in the New York urban area?
I would say roughly 90, within, a range of about 40
Of
miles.
college stations and
everything,
all
AM,
types.
FM, everything combined.
90 compared to 4. That's amazing.
Yes, their communications are rather primitive.
Uh-huh. What about the formats of the radio stations?
Well,
is there anything like WNCN?
not that I could tell, and I listened, of course, in the morning and in the evening because nightlife in the Soviet Union is not exactly Paris or New York. It seems to be a conglomeration. Theme from The Godfather,
Really?
plus classical piano music, plus orchestra music, plus light, what we would call pop music here.
Yeah.
Everything, but there was indeed no station that I found in Moscow that was anything like WNCN.
Is there some hit tune going around or something?
Well, outside of The Godfather, I really heard nothing. The movie had just played in the Soviet Union.
I
And they
see.
were very taken with it, I presume.
As an American, how were you treated?
I must say I was treated very well by the interest people. One could say a lot of things about the Soviet Union, but one must remember, as Matt and I were talking before the program, that they view the last 60 years as a great experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And as they said to me, the experiment is still continuing.
How many cities were you in?
It was in 4, Moscow, Kiev, Odessa, and Leningrad.
How were the conservatories?
Quite beautiful structures, all pre-revolutionary, really. I must say that most of the great beauty in Russia is pre-revolutionary, as one can imagine.
Yes. What was the most beautiful of these 4 cities you just...
Kiev was the most beautiful from a landscaping point of view, greenery, and of course they don't have overcrowding as we do because they can control the population. But Leningrad, I think, is the great city of Russia, and this is in great part due to the marvelous, marvelous palaces that exist there, that still exist there, that are national shrines, really.
What was your great experience in Leningrad?
Oh, the Hermitage, or as they said, the Hermitage.
The great museum,
Yes.
one of the great museums of the world.
As Catherine the Great called it, the Hermitage means solitary corner.
Uh-huh.
And the art collection alone, it took me 2 hours to simply walk through it. Walk through it. I mean, it is absolutely unbelievable and something that everyone should see.
Well, I'd love to.
What about concert life?
Very large in Russia, and one must understand that basically there is not a great deal to do and there's not a lot of money to spend. And what time, free time, leisure time they do have, they go to the opera and to concerts. And they will have sometimes like 6 concert halls or 7 concert halls in one city. And I'm not talking only about Moscow, but about Kiev and Odessa. And I've been told by friends of mine who have played there that the greatest audiences in the world, they have a tradition of classical music which goes back far beyond our own. And this is their great love.
Mm-hmm.
The young people seem to lean a little toward rock now. They have a great fetish, if I may use the word, for Western rock music.
Mm-hmm. It's moved in there, huh?
Absolutely. They know all of the American rock stars.
Really? Now, you were telling me, though, that the great sensation you provided to Russia was the many disposable lighters that you brought.
Lighters and American cigarettes. You can get anything for those 2 things.
Yeah.
Those are 2 absolute requirements when traveling in the Soviet Union.
And you brought in, I was amazed, you said you brought in 8 cartons. I said, that's unusual, but you made it a point to say that you smoked
4 packs a day.
4 packs a day.
They looked at me a little bit strangely, but since I'm an American and, of course, crazy, that all seemed very much to fit. And I did, of course, bring back a wonderful record, which I told you about.
Yes, Alexander Sofronitsky playing Chopin,
Yes.
which we now have in our library. Thank you. Okay, now a complete performance of the Piano Sonata, Opus 10, Number 3 in D major, the 7th that Beethoven wrote.
Yes, hopefully from the beginning.
And all of it, indeed. Alfred Brendel. Stanley, that was a magnificent performance by Alfred Brendel of the 7th Piano Sonata of Beethoven.
Absolutely, I enjoyed it very much, David.
Tomorrow we move to the year 1799 and the Grand Sonata Pathétique, the most famous of Beethoven's early piano sonatas. Join us then, and thank you for listening.